everyone. Welcome back to another Flipping the Barrel podcast. And remember, this is a podcast where we dive deep into the stories of energy leaders across our industry and find out more about their career and life journey. Today, without further ado, we have Marcelo Alves, who he is the Vice President of Management Systems and Chief of Transformation at TechnipFMC. Could not be more excited to have Marcelo on. I had the opportunity of meeting him when we actually came to TechnipFMC to do a girl dad panel, and Marcelo was one of the panelists. And your whole journey, your children, what you learn from not only your wife but also having a daughter just completely inspired me, and I loved hearing you speak, and also just your leadership style and how authentic you were, Marcelo, that I knew you had to come on the podcast. So we've been really looking forward to showcasing your story to the rest of our listeners who weren't able to make it that day at TechnipFMC. So thank you so much for saying yes and coming on today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to join. Actually, humble and honored to be here. I love your story. I love what you guys do. Fantastic. Having an opportunity to share a little bit about my journey and story, and hopefully help people on the journey as well.
Thanks, Marcelo. And I truly think with your story, you're going to inspire a lot of people. So let's go back to the beginning. You grew up in Brazil, beautiful Brazil. I haven't had a chance to go, but I would love to visit. And you know what? You told us you were pretty shy, you're an introvert. You had a deep passion for sports and a big influence of your family because, your dad was extremely hardworking and your mom was super social. And they really both help your identity into becoming who you are today and really guide you in your career choices. And you decided to study mechanical engineering. Tell us a little bit about just life growing up and how sports influenced you into, even who you are today and those life lessons.
No, absolutely. Rio de Janeiro is a place to go once in life. I'll keep reminding you about that. But that change has been tremendous on me, right? That brought me my work ethics, right, from my dad, how he was serious, committed about everything he was doing, but also brought me like my relationship building from my mom. And the sports experience all brought, actually taught me very early in my stage in my career about how a team sport, a one team approach was super important for building winning teams, winning organizations. That was profoundly connect with me about how truly you can form a diverse and winning teams to go over the challenge they're facing there. So that for me was really very organically, very personal. I didn't really have to put much, specific developmental activities there, and that carries still with me up to today. And everything I do, I remind about those lessons from my dad, from my mom, and for also being involved in those team sports activity there.
So thank you, Marcelo. It was really interesting hearing about your background, especially with the coming from sports. I always thought it was so interesting when you told us you were shy. Since when we met, you definitely were a very extroverted, outgoing person, I felt like on the panel. So I think it's so amazing to see like that progression through life where somebody at the very beginning might be shy and then now it's very hard to even be like, really? At that time you were shy. So thank you for sharing that. When we spoke, I remember you talking about one of your first jobs while you were living in Brazil was to be working for a pharma company that was very popular at the time. And then you received a call from a friend that was looking to hire an engineer. And this was in the oil and gas industry, which was very hard to get into. You really had to know somebody in order to get into it, especially in the country that you were living and working in. However, they needed somebody with your technical knowledge, and so it was like a really good fit. Would really love to hear like your thoughts on oil and gas at the time, especially since you were more focused on working in the pharma industry. And also, what was it like jumping like straight into oil and gas, given kind of like your prior experience? You were really focused on pharma and not so much the energy industry.
Thank you. Yeah. Listen, this was a little over 25 years ago. At that instance, pharma was number one in Rio de Janeiro, the city I used to live. And oil and gas was, of course, really interesting, attractive industry to be part of, but it was very close, primarily around the large company there, Petrobras. And recently at that time, the industry was opening up for international companies to come into the country and help Petrobras to explore it and really go after the reservoirs there. So when I got that call, for me it was like, okay, this might be the entry door and point for me in that industry. So that really caught my attention. Very difficult. It was very technical. Without experience, it would be very change or very difficult to get into that industry. And I didn't hesitate to take a risk. I'll be honest, it was a risk to completely shift it from 2, 3 pharma companies into a completely new industry. But at that time, I had the technical background as a mechanical engineer, and I used that into, I would say, my platform to transition with some knowledge, some technical knowledge, but really learning from scratch for me was okay to sitting next to people in the industry there, and hey, can you explain me about the industry, the job, and the work? And it was fantastic. Also, to be honest, one of the things was at that time catching my attention was it was also attractive in terms of the overall compensation and benefits they were offering at that time for me. Very young, very early stage of my career. That was also giving me like, okay, this is could be a good avenue for me to build my career.
So, Marcelo, I would say throughout your story, a lot of what resonates is taking risks. And I would say through your career journey, this is something that you've done and it pays off, when you take risks. And actually, for the listeners, when we first met, you showed us this graph, on a PowerPoint type of thing, and you kind of had mapped your entire career with ups and downs and all of these key milestones. And I just loved it. I really think everybody should do that at some point and just reflect on your entire career journey and see, like, where did I do really well? What made me happy? What were those challenges? And what are the lessons learned? And, taking risks, to your point, is something that you did. And the first one I would say was getting into an industry that you knew nothing about. But second was when you got your first international role to go to the US. And I believe it was here in Houston. And so this posed a lot of risk because you were leaving your comfort zone of your country. Second, a different language, which is just English. And the other thing too was you had a young family, and your wife actually had to kind of restart a little bit. She was a professional, working in Brazil, and coming to the U.S. It always posed a challenge in terms of continuing your career for those that aren't the one being transferred. And so, can you tell us a little bit about just that first international move to the U.S. and how was that? And then we'll get into your other international move, which is India. But first, I want to cover the U.S.
That's great, and it was not easy, right? As a family, we always together kept a little open dialogue, transparency. We discussed about what was the right things or not the right things for us as a family. So we had to really, of course, evaluate the pros and cons. And we were okay. We are in a dual career in country in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. My wife was a pharmacist. She had a job in a industry, right? A manufacturing pharma company, and I was in oil and gas, and it was like a big decision for us with the early kids there. But we knew what we wanted in life together, right, as a family, and we thought that would be the right thing to do, looking not only on the next step on the short term, but also for the future of our kids, for our family education. So we put all that together to see what was the value proposition. And it is important for you to know as a family what you want in life, right? What are your values? What you really want to keep it within yourself along the journey there, so that you know what is the right decision or not, right? Even though it might take a risk, at least you're taking steps in the right direction for what you want to take your family for the future, right? So not easy, very challenging, but at the same time, you want to really, invest in your future, invest on the future for your family, and as long as you know this is in the direction you're looking for, that tough decision, you make it with a conscious mind. You're doing the right thing for your family.
And then how about, so I remember you mentioned Houston, to your point, was a little challenging at the beginning, but you got used to it. Your wife really loved Houston. You're still in Houston now, all these years later. So it became home. But then you got another letter saying that you had this great opportunity in Pune in India. And, you guys decided to take it. And I believe your wife was either pregnant on the way to India or right when you got to India. you found out you were having your second daughter or second child, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that, because India was not as easy as adapting as it was to when you moved to Houston. And I remember when you spoke to us, it was a lot of challenges from just the medical side of complications, maybe of having your child there, to being away so far away from Brazil, from your family. And also, I think it's easier for the person who's getting the transfer. You get to go to work, you get to have your family at work, but for your wife, she was alone in a completely different country. And I would say a lot of people listening to this podcast have been there or will be there at some point, because it's just the nature of our careers in this industry. But I wanted you to shine just a light on what that was like, because it's a story that I think a lot of people will resonate with you on.
Yeah, it is. And all my close friends know this story very well, because we rely on them along the moment we were in India, to be honest. It was another tough decision. India was not on the map, but being a global leader company in oil and gas, you're, of course, exposure to opportunities outside, just the locations you feel comfortable. And we had several discussions about the opportunity. It was like a potential really grow opportunity in shifting my career, but it was a challenge from the personal family side for my wife to transition to from a place like you said, home, Houston, where she felt like she found herself here, to a completely opposite in terms of a lot of ways on cultural standpoint. And we went from no to no, and then we were like progressing, evaluating the opportunity to the point that, you know what, um, it is the right thing for us as a family, even though it doesn't look like on the surface, because we're gonna grow, or I'm gonna grow professionally, and we're gonna have further opportunities in the future to eventually come back to Houston or to move to other areas as well. But it was very challenging. You said, my wife was not pregnant at that moment when we made a decision, but we found along the way she was pregnant, so that add a little bit of more complexity into the, when you transition to a completely like 180-degree cultural place, there's a lot that going on in your life, right? Personally, at work, and you add these personal circumstances that brought really a little stretch for her, to be honest. It was very difficult for her to deal with the pregnancy, the changes, and we're gonna have to really, at that time, we had to really support very much her and support each other during the journey there. For me, I learned I could adapt it to any environment. I'll be honest with you. I've been in this kind of a journey for quite some time doing my job, and whether I'm doing that in Brazil, when I'm doing US, or I'm doing in India, or any location that is work, is rewarding. You're dealing with people in a global company and oil and gas. But for her, it was very challenging to move all the way, leave behind her career, come to US, find a new home, then now suddenly, after 3 years, going to another place and completely start from scratch, right? With all these elements. So she had a really, really a challenging on the mental health standpoint in country. And there was a point in time when we had to really stop. Okay, is this really what we want? Right? What does it mean for us? We were buying time for me to deliver what I was tasked to in country. At the same time, we were like, find, okay, what is the right thing for us as a family, right? We'll continue moving around to different countries. Do we want to stabilize into another country? Want to go back home? So it was really, really challenging. I'm glad you brought that up. My close friends know about that. My family, all family know that, of course. And we decided at that time, okay, let's go back to our home country, and that's our safe port, right? You have your extended family next to you. You're going to have the whole support system to recover our family, get our family back where we wanted. And that was in essence. Still remember, my dad was in India first time in his life, and I remember he and I was having this conversation about, okay, what you want in your life, right? Great, you're in a fantastic career, you're in a fantastic role now. Probably the top in terms of you can get as an international mobile. But you also have your family, you also have your values, right? And there's no money in the world that really pays this off, right? Your family, your health. right, your children. So we decided to make a pivot to go back to our home country, right? So not easy decision, another one, but I actually took another big risk because imagine I was an expat, right, with a lot of support from the company, and I moved back to Brazil as a local, right, as a local employee. So it was a big shift in terms of career as well at that stage.
Yeah, and I'm just so glad that you're willing to talk about this because I think a lot of times when people say they're taking an international opportunity, it's really glorified. And they sometimes tend to miss what does that really mean for the family until they arrive there and then they're starting to second guess, what decision they made. Because you learned from this experience as a leader, what are you doing today to help your employees, or what can those that are listening help their employees who are making these decisions to make sure, for one, they make the right decision, and for two, that they feel confident enough to go back to their employer and say, hey, I can't live in this country, so what are my options?
Yeah, I'm of course I'm oversensitive about the topic, so I care a lot about when I see either people within my team or my organization or someone in our organization, that I know that is moving to another country. I try to really keep a close engagement with them, understand not only how they are doing personally at work, but understand how their families are really adapting and along the process. Of course, I try to share a little bit my experience, but without really, telling them the challenge they will face. But trying like okay, understand, spend time with the family is important. Try to spend time also traveling with them while you're in a new country to understand what's happening available there in the surroundings. So I try to share the experience, but the key thing for me is have an open, trust dialogue, understand if their families are also getting the value of the experience they're having, and if they need any support, of course, they know they can count on me. They know they can count on the company as well to support along that transition or adaptation or challenges they might be facing there. So I'm oversensitive, supportive, share the learnings, but at the same time, they need to understand what is the right thing for them as a family, right? Everyone is different, what they are looking for when they have an assignment.
Yeah, no, I think the first thing is sharing your story, but then also letting people know that their journey can look different and their experience can look different. There's people that have gone probably to the same place and they loved it. So it's every time, it's so different even when we all share of different roles or things, and some people thrive in certain environments, some people don't. So I think it's just the fact that you're sharing it and just letting people know, hey, you got to communicate with your family. It's going to be challenging, but then make your decision, because who knows if it'll go good or not. On that point, when you moved back to Brazil as a local, you kind of not took a demotion, but really you were on a path, to your point, of progression. And I think what's really nice about your story is that even though that hiccup happened and you kind of went back to your home country, you're still a VP today. And so your career was still going to get somewhere, but you still had to make your decisions of what made sense for your family. And I think a lot of people sometimes, they think it's the end of the world when you make this decision, or you don't take this job, or you don't take this promotion, or you don't take this move. They think that's it, my career's over. But I think you were able to prove that you've got it in you, that no matter what came your way, you were still going to be very successful in your career, even if that meant taking a step back. And so my question was, you were working for a big oil and gas service company, you moved back to Brazil, they brought you back, but then you left and you went to TechnipFMC. That's when you joined TFMC, correct? When you came back. Gotcha. And so leaving and going into Technique FMC, and then how was that like in terms of just changing your direction and restarting or rebuilding your career somewhere else, which sometimes can be difficult because you have to work on your brand again. They need to see who Marcelo is and kind of deliver again, versus another company that you've been with for so many years. How was that like?
Yeah, it was very interesting because I was transitioning from one of the leaders in the industry. And of course, I had already my name, my reputation, relationships. So it's not easy for you to transition, let that behind. So I was starting from scratch when it comes to, okay, you join another leader in the industry, but you have to really build all that from scratch, right? But interesting enough, that transition, I also have an opportunity to really have, I would say, my first senior leadership role with exposure that help on my development as well, right? So I was starting from scratch, but in a lot more high exposure because I transitioned from a much larger company to a company that was okay, leader global, but in a in a less scale. So that got me a lot of growth and learning very fast on that transition. But it was not a decision about company A or B, Maciel. It was really about really a life decision. This is what we wanted. This is what's the right thing for us. Okay, I'll transition from company A to company B there, and there will be changes for me in the career and challenges. But at the same time, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I knew exactly what I wanted to be in 5, 10+ years in my career, and it was the right step in the right direction there. So that's always important that we keep that in our mind about really not the next step, but really what you want to see in the future, right? Down the road. So for us, it was risk taken, of course, restart, but at the same time, so rewarding. And when you get out of your comfort zone, you're growing. So I kept growing, of course, learning a new part of the oil and gas in a new leader company. So I had to really, of course, reinvent myself as well and build all those relationships, right? So fantastic experience. Not easy at the beginning, of course, but once you're there, in 3 years, actually, we were like doing a fantastic work and getting a lot of recognition for the work done, and we were growing at that stage, so that it kept me very busy at the work, growing, helping the company at the same time, helping my family to recover with the extended family support. It was like the perfect fit for me. It was like I knew exactly that job. Honestly, was like I still remember that job. Was like, okay, this is who I am. So I was that clique as well.
Yeah, the one thing I really like about your story, Marcelo, is there's multiple times where like not just who you are, but also the prioritization of your family, and so you're really able to make these decisions quicker. You're able to come to an analysis on really which direction you need to go, and I think that's really incredible thing to have. Turning to your personal journey, you also dedicated and made a transformation. You decided because this sounds like kind of like your life. When you decide on something, you're going to do it. And you decided to focus on your mental health. And what that also meant is you're going to lose up to 40 pounds, which you ended up succeeding. And it really set this internal goal for you, and it really made you like realize and restructure kind of like your life. Talk to us about this time, because there's a lot of people that I know go on this transformation journey, and they learn so much about themselves from it, but also how they want to be moving forward. And I'd love to know kind of those key takeaways that you learned from this transformation.
Yeah, I all these years, my early stages where I moved out of Brazil to US, then India, then back to Brazil, and then moving back to US in 2015, it was a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat, right, and commitments, and to of course deliver, outperform, and get the companies to succeed there. No surprise, a lot of compromise on my side, on the personal side, on my physical health and my mental health. Right, that's a reality. But there was a point in time in 2015, 16 when I realized I wanted to see my two girls to growing right in the future, and I realized if I didn't make that change at that time, I would put that at risk or jeopardy, to be honest. So I made a really a personal decision to look into a program that could help me, because I didn't do that on my own, to be honest. I had like really, professionals that could help me, right, with coaching and with some tools that I could use, and that was a way for me to see, okay, I'm here for the long run. I want to see my girls to growing, right? I want to continue growing my career, but in a more sustainable, balanced way. It will not be like sustainable, continue just putting all my energy into work, right? So I had to really start really work on that. So it was and I'll be honest with you, that also happened again in during the pandemic, because there was two instances in my life that I really realized, okay, I need to pause here. Cannot continue in autopilot. How do I really right blend? Have a, this this blended life concept? How I can rebalance my life in a way that I continue sustainably, evolving right, personally and professionally there. But there was like I saw that, okay, in the future I'll have a problem if I don't change immediately.
You know, you're an autopilot. To your point, you're working so hard on your career, and then you forget a little bit about yourself and then about your family. And so just sharing that, I think it's good for all of us to be self-aware and realize, hey, I'm filling everybody else's cup, especially my work, and that's great. But then to your point, I may not be around when my kids are older because I'm not in a good health condition, etc. So it's really great that you shared that. And on the topic of your two daughters, you know, the whole panel that you did with Jamie on Girl Dad panel, tell us a little bit about just how your two daughters and your wife have influenced you as a leader today, and just now with the push of just gender balance, or more women are coming to work in the industry and even in senior leadership roles. How has your daughters influenced you? Just even with things they say to you at home, that, you know, when you go to work, you see things very differently through them.
Yeah, and I had that chance with Jaime to share with the people there in our that panel there. Listen, the key thing that came to my mind was my two goals. I have really high expectations about myself, right? Truly, very high expectations about me, everything I do, and I was carrying that with me with everyone that I work with and everyone I was, having a relationship with. And I realized, dealing with my two daughters, that I have to be a little bit more mindful about that. I can everyone will be like Marcelo, right? That will just immediately have these high expectations as well. I realized that I had to really not necessarily have to be things my way, right? I have to listen a little bit more. I have to be more attentive about the diversity of thoughts or diversity of ideas, how we should consider, of course, once you go into these unconscious bias, diversity, all that, you learn how you can really get the best out of people and bring all that together. But it took me a while for me to learn that. And I was picking up that from my young daughters. And of course, I had got exposure in the company as well to learn more about all these unconscious bias, diversity, how you can really appreciate all the great things everyone can bring, right? And how you can really, unlock the best of people there. But my daughters brought me to be more mindful, patient, understand more, listen more, learn, and there are so many different ways we can do things, not just one way.
I just think it's so incredible. And every time people, you have children, especially, I think it's just seeing my husband too, having girls and being a girl dad, they just learn so much just about, I think, girls in general, where they're, they have a wife, of course, but it's just not the same when you see like, you have like this little infant and then they become a toddler and then you get to see the stages and you get to see the development of them, and bringing that into your work life, I think is just so important. And you did speak about that indefinitely on the panel that you did, which is why I was just so inspired by just those key takeaways that your daughters really taught you. So thank you for sharing. To end the podcast, we really wanted to talk to you about something that we think is a huge need and a huge shift in today's environment, and that's to be authentic. We see it all over LinkedIn, we see it all over social media. People nowadays, especially the Gen Zs, they want to see like authentic leadership. They want to know who the person is. They want to see you posting about your life, but they also want to hear about your life and hear about your challenges, and they want to hear it from an aspect of like what it was really like, not like this, sugar coated, story. And you've really taken a step forward to do that. And I know it's a difficult shift. And you have also did that in your leadership style. Can you tell us, what can somebody do today that might be listening to also showcase that authentic side, and maybe one of the most challenging parts of you transitioning into that and how you overcame it?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. Couldn't be better for wrapping up the podcast. And I'm very passionate about that. It took me a while to learn about this. I'll be honest with you. For years and years and years, I had a lot of great exposure to great leaders and mentors, and I've seen them as a role model. And I was kind of a striving to learn from them and kind of becoming similar to them. That has been for the early stage of my career, along the way. And when I first joined the global leadership program in the company, then when I truly invest time to understand who I was truly was as a person, as a professional, and more important, what kind of leader I wanted to be, right? And that helped me a lot to truly feel comfortable. Who is Marcelo, right? But not about the role models I was looking along my career there. And there is not many people, right? So there's only one Marcelo, there's only one Maciel, there's only one Jaime, right? So how you get, right, that uniqueness, right? That is what is valuable. It's not about you trying to be like the people who inspire you, the people who are your role model, but the authenticity, the uniqueness that only you can bring into the world, only you can bring to the people in front of you. So I was a lot more comfortable with my flaws, right? My flaws, my issues, my what I'm not perfect at, what I'm not good at, and that was a big shift in transformation for me as a leader. And of course I keep building on that over the years, increasing my confidence, increasing my my different leadership skills, because you don't stop learning. But that was for me when I truly make a mental shift in terms of accepting who I am, and get the best out of it in an authentic way, and just bring that every moment you engage with people.
I really couldn't think of a better way to close the podcast, Marcelo. I think it's so important to your points on just like being authentic. And so many times, even today, the younger generation still, and like with social media and Instagram, you get so wrapped up in like people's stories, and you see their photos and you just want to be exactly like them. And I think it's so important, like you just said, to understand like nobody is like you. You are here on earth for a reason, and you're that way to be you, not to copy Marcelo, not to copy Maciel, but to be you. And that's what really drives people to you. And I think that's why we connected so well on the panel too, because you were just that. You were yourself, and it was very easy to connect with you. So I'm just thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing the challenges, because you did not have like a straight linear, oh, every transition was wonderful, every move was great. And I think it's just so important to showcase that. And it would be really cool if you could share one day on social media that graph that you shared with us the day that we met. I think that's really neat and something that our
Yes. You have to post it on
yeah,
LinkedIn.
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay,
I think
good.
it's really cool.
I'll find a way to do that.
We would love that. But
Can I say something? Can I say
yes,
something? Yes.
Yes, for sure.
There's something that I learned recently, and I want to share with both of you and the people who are going to be, of course, listening to the podcast. Right? We've been in the recent times too much distracted with all happening in our lives, social media, tools, everything that's happening there. But how when you are meeting someone like I'm meeting you both today, and hopefully I'm meeting other people listening there, when you have a chance, you choose the people in front of you. Give them your 100% of your time. Give your 100% of yourself to that person in front of you. It's so important to be present and be respectful. And I think we at times so much in a rush in our lives and distracted. And I think we need to keep ourselves, remember about these, and just give yourself 100% to the person in front of you. Choose people every time you can.
choose people over devices. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Great way to end the podcast. It's
Yes.
a good
No,
lesson
thank you
and
so
good
much,
advice.
Marcelo, for coming on. Really appreciate your insights. And thank you again for just spending time with us today. And if you like this podcast, please like, subscribe, leave us a message, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you again, Marcelo. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.